planet. But Brooke and I, Brooke loves it. That's right. And I love the fact that she does love it. Brooke and I are going to tag team it. So we'll just kind of go through the presentation. Please feel free to ask questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll find out. I promise. Okay, so essentially what we're looking at is, basically the impact on our revenue, and particularly with the education fund, that revenue is going to be impacted by our enrollment. So currently we are looking at an enrollment of around 1360. That does include about 15 virtual students. We won't have those numbers completely solidified until around the 1st of October when we have our count day. So that's essentially what we're looking at. Once again, we can look at that number and figure the loss from the fact that the class that we graduated versus the kindergarten class that we came in. There's about a 24 student difference right there. So, and that's kind of been the trend over the last couple of years. We've had smaller kindergarten classes, and we've graduated, fairly large, I wouldn't say large, but fairly over 100 high school seniors. I will say that it appears to be a trend, particularly here in Tipton. There just are not a lot of school-age kids. That's really kind of what's happening. And I'm afraid that it is likely not going to get better, because I think 2023 is the lowest birth rate that Indiana's had in like the last 50 years or something like that. I don't want to over dramatize that, but anyway, that's again, it's just a bit of a trend. So keeping that in mind, that does impact our education fund dollars. We did have less than a 1% increase from the state per student. So that has some bearing. The assessed valuation, and we talk a little bit about the assessed valuation on some further slides. That's going to have an impact on our debt service. That's going to have an impact on operation funds. And then on the other parts that have an impact on the operation fund or statewide average income, circuit breaker, which we are well aware of, grant funding, which would be our title grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and then also any state grants that we would get that also would accompany those funds, which tend to be now a part of the allocation given per student. And then obviously any kind of investment return or anything like that we would be getting. And honestly, we've had a very good year as far as some return on investments and money we've had in the bank. So this is from Policy Analytics. They're a group that we partnered with. And this kind of gives a general idea of what the circuit breaker loss is per student and state average. So the circuit breaker loss state average in 2023, we don't have the 2024 data, is around $370 per student. That's statewide average, yes. So again, that just kind of gives you an idea of really kind of those impacts with the circuit breaker, and we can talk a lot more about that here in a little bit. Obviously in the education fund, it's paying for teacher salaries, benefits, principals, special programs, really anything that has to do with educating the students is really going to come out of that education fund. The revenue sources. So everybody gets a basic grant. So the basic grant that everyone gets is all the same. So the state comes up with this formula and says, this is your basic grant that you get. Then they calculate what's called the complexity index, which would involve special education, the number of students that we have that are non-English speaking, and the number of students that we would have that are in a low socioeconomic situation. And then we also get some more dollars for special ed grant through the state. and then just some local income tax, and I can let Brooke talk a little bit about that, because this is where I get a little confused on miscellaneous revenue sides of it, because that's a little bit odd, so.
Yes, the county auditor distributes to us, in the past it's been in the $14,000 range, and it's called certified lit shares, like local option tax. And I don't believe every county has this. I know when I was at Western, that's something they didn't receive, so I feel like we're fortunate to have that. And there's a one-time supplemental payment a year that we just received, which was 25,000, I think 902, somewhere in that range. So yeah, that's income we can look forward to, unless the legislators change something.
The miscellaneous revenue also does have an impact on the operation fund and debt service, so there is some money that goes in for that as well. So operation fund, oh man, I am a hot mic now. Thank you. Transportation, basically operation funds taking care of transportation, bus replacement, capital projects, payroll, central office, utilities, custodial, maintenance, property insurance, etc. So basically the fund, that's what the operation fund is taking care of. The revenue sources, these are again, those miscellaneous taxes that the CVET and the is part of. I'm not sure what CVET is.
Yeah,
I do know what
commercial
FIT
vehicle
is.
tax, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And then I do know that FIT is
Financial
an assessment to financial institutions that we get, and then also auto excise tax, which we get. So that is added into operations fund and debt service. We are able to transfer up to 15% from the education fund into the operations fund. And that really comes back from the way that funding was structured before we went to the three kind of streamlined areas. There was always, before we would get our total appropriation from the state, there was always a part of local property tax that went towards paying for teachers. So basically, the people down in Indianapolis decided that that would equal about 15% of what we're getting from the state through education fund. So that's kind of how that 15% came about. There are a lot of people that will question whether that is completely accurate, but that's where it comes from. We also, have dealt with the maximum levy growth quotient. We've been in that zone for the last few years of a cap at 4%. So even though our AV this year is going up 12%, our revenue for operations is capped at 4%. And then the Department of Local Government Finance, our good friends at the DLGF, they are estimating that our loss to property tax caps will be around 600,000. Currently, it's 525. We've been rather fortunate because their estimate has been higher the last couple of years, so hopefully that'll continue. Okay, so talking a little bit about, again, so we're talking from policy analytics. This is from a state average, again, from 2023. So we're looking at all these. We're looking at the funds per student in debt service and in operations. So typically, the average is around this number when you add both of those together, and that's per student divided. That's the total amount of money that's generated divided by the number of students attending school in Indiana. Basically, how that comes about.
Before you go,
Yep.
The columns to the left, is that us or is this all state?
This is all state average.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you kind of see that there's a little bit of an ebb and flow to it. And I don't know what 24 would look like, but we will get that data once 24 is over. So this is kind of a rolling average, and this is for districts that are non-referendum districts. So basically for small districts, which we would fall into, this dollar figure is around $3,500 per student. That is the state average for small districts. Statewide, it's a little bit lower. And then you have schools that are really highly impacted by the circuit breaker. where they fall, and then growing districts, which is really where the money increases are coming from because they just have an increase in revenue. So debt service fund, essentially what we're talking about there is we're talking about that it pays our lease rentals, our general bonds, gated fees. Again, same sources of revenue with property tax, same things we were talking about before with excise tax, FIT, all of those different areas. So now we're kind of getting into more specifics about TIP. Okay. So what you see here is when we are compared to districts our size, which these are all districts that are our size. And I mentioned to Rob yesterday when we had a conversation that MSD Warren County, which is a county-wide school, is very similar to us in enrollment, demographic, full shoot and match. So you can see that we are kind of in the same ballpark as far as the debt service number and as far as what we're able to collect in operations. Okay. And again, all this is dependent upon, you know, what the rates are, what the AV is, what different factors that would go into whether those dollars are, you know, whether we have an increasing AV or a non-existent, you know, AV is starting, it's stagnant. And there are some corporations, even with a lot of the changes that have happened with assessed valuation, are still kind of a flat line to district. Like for instance, if you would look at, you know, some of the districts around Indianapolis, they are really hit very hard by the circuit breaker and TIP districts. So they would be on that low side of that. Yes. Yes. You'll have to tell me. I mean, Barry just got this off the DLGF, which is the guy from Policy Analytics. So yeah, that's basically what I understand is he's taking whatever we get as far as revenue in operations and dividing it by our enrollment. And the same thing would be with debt service. So whatever our debt service payment is, divide that by. Yeah.
Have to ask
And,
him.
and we can have Barry clarify that. So that's something we can ask Barry. Yeah, yeah. I know it's a great question. So a little bit of budget history on how this all works. To kind of let you know, where we are as far as our overall rate. So we pretty much stay under that dollar, and I assume that we will continue to be in that realm once everything settles, once everything goes through, and we get our final form from the DLGF. So once again, we're looking at kind of our total advertised budget. There's sometimes a little bit of a difference between what we advertise and what we get. So you can see that there are times when there's very little change. There's times when there is some change. Again, it just kind of depends on a lot of different things, how much cash balance we're carrying over. There's just a lot of different variables that will go into play with what that final number will look like.
I think that advertised number needs corrected, Ryan.
It does.
Yeah.
That's,
it needs-
I looked it up on the DLGF, and that's a number that came up.
Well, the number should be the 21,145,802, which is in the budget form 1 for 2025.
Okay.
Is what we'll advertise, so we'll need to.
Oh,
correct
you
that.
mean, so I have the 2025 wrong.
Yes,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right,
that's okay.
okay.
21.
That's why we do this, guys.
145,802.
So anyway, to kind of let you know, so how do we get to this number? Once again, we take our assessed valuation, we advertise at 95% of our assessed valuation. And when we actually look at that number, then we come up with the actual that is going to be higher. Okay, but we are basing all of this budget on at least a 95 to a 90%. It kind of depends on which fund we're doing that. It's a little bit of it's kind of a nuanced thing, I'll be very honest, just to try to make sure that we're getting the most dollars that we can. And I don't want to say it's a game, because I wouldn't say that, but sometimes it kind of feels that way. So, but we're trying to, again, create a super high budget and creating, in what we want to spend, and then looking at it very conservatively about what we're going to get in, which is why we look at those reduced numbers. So just kind of non-referendum property tax numbers. So these are schools without referendum. So this is the average tax rate for schools without a referendum. And as you can see, and I can go back here, we are pretty much in line with what that number looks like, actually a little bit lower. And again, we anticipate that that will continue to be the trend. But this would be the average for the state of combined dollars that are coming in as far as a rate, average rate. And again, these are schools that are not funding a referendum outside of the general taxing agent. So now I will admit to you, this one gets a little confusing to me, but this is what I understand this to be. So essentially what I asked was, okay, let's get a breakdown of how we are spending this is kind of our operations dollars, okay, compared to districts that are our similar size. Again, the same districts that are compared in the other document. So we are spending really about 60% of what we are getting per student on transportation, utilities, and insurance. So, you can look at that. We are paying a high amount in, for transportation. We're not paying the highest. Obviously, Switzerland County is paying a higher rate. Again, I don't know what their busing looks like. I don't know how big their district is. I mean, these are numbers, but it doesn't necessarily, we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples as far as transportation dollars. When we're looking at utilities, again, this is kind of a bit of the Wild West, but it does kind of give us an idea of as far as what we're spending on utilities versus what our other districts our same size are. So basically about $328 per student. And then what we're paying for insurance, which, the property casualty, all of the insurance that we approved in April. So basically about 109 per student. No. This is everything that's coming out of operations, right? Yes. Everything that's coming out of operations. No, that is not the teacher insurance or anything.
And it's also important to remember that this data has none of our gift from TMU on our brand new rate. So this is very misleading as far as what our actual costs are for utilities and for insurance. It leaves none of the 20-some% increases we've had. So when you look at it, that's the data we have, but in perspective and context, we're paying a lot more than this for.
And
it's staggered for 3 years, so we're good. It's that trend line's not going to be pretty.
And we'll be able to compare this when 24 comes out to kind of see where those impacts are. But with that data that's available, that's where we are. So basically, talking about how other entities are structured as far as their revenue, what they're getting per student. So essentially with small districts, we're looking at, an average of around $825 per student spent on transportation, $400 spent on utilities, $124. So it kind of gives you an idea of where we fall with other small districts, not just the ones that we've pulled out specific to the data. So again, that's going to give you the statewide idea of how we compare. And then talking a little bit about expenditures per student. So this would be essentially talking about education fund and operations fund. So basically the dollars we are spending per student in all together. So they're combining everything that we get in the education fund, everything we get in operations, dividing it by the number of students we have, and coming up with that number. So that gives you kind of a general idea of where we fall in there. Again, we are very, very close, once again, to Warren County. So a very similar comparison. So basically breaking it down, looking at all this, so we get about $23.30 per student altogether with operation fund revenue. 900 of that is going to be through transportation, utilities are 300, insurance 100. So that kind of leaves $939 per student that we have for building maintenance, upkeep, custodial maintenance, salaries and benefits, technology equipment, salary benefits, and then central office personnel, salary and benefits. So that's really, kind of how the pot is distributed when we're looking at those operation funds. So just to kind of give you a general idea of what's left. So based on the appraisal from USI Insurance per year, in order to replace everything, it would be $144 million. So based on the formula that has been used for probably the last 30 years in schools, our annual maintenance should be $2.9 million. Unfortunately, that $2.9 million is just about what we generate in operations as far as revenue. So, so what it does, and this is what happens with many schools, particularly our size, schools that are not really growing in enrollment, is we don't have a lot of money to maintain and repair things like roofs, things like HVAC. We end up having to do Band-Aids because that's the least expensive thing we can do. That's why we have building projects. That's why we have geo bonds. This is why schools like us are in that world. So just to kind of give you a general idea. And again, this came from Policy Analytics. So those numbers come from him. I'll be glad to go through how he got there. If you would like to know that information, I can get that from him. So essentially talking about how inflation has impacted what dollars we're getting from operations. So we have here essentially what we're getting, and then if it was keeping up with inflation, it should be up in this number. So we're obviously, still fighting that inflation barrier. Sometimes I think our friends down in Indianapolis forget that we also feel inflation, and we don't have fixed costs. Our costs are constantly going up. And so when we talk to our people, that are making decisions, we need to make sure that they understand that we don't have fixed costs. Our costs are going up just like everybody else's. So kind of back to the appropriations and our requests and kind of what we're looking for within each fund, so you have a general idea of what we're looking at. I think I actually have the number right on this one. I apologize. So essentially what we're looking at is these are the numbers that are requested based on our ADM. This is what we're looking at as far as operations. And then this is what we're looking at as far as debt service, which would be a grand total of about $21,145,000. Again, so we've looked very closely at staff. We've made cuts where we've had to. We understand that if if our enrollment is declining, we have to reduce staffing because that's our biggest expenditure. There's no way you can only buy single ply toilet paper so long, and it doesn't really go that long. And you're the guy that knows all about that stuff. I mean, it's not that much savings. So again, again, it's one of those things that we have, that's the only way that we can make up the biggest difference. And again, we look at everything very, very seriously. When we have a resignation, we determine whether it's a need, whether it needs to be replaced. And we oftentimes try to figure out some ways that we can economize or spread out some duties. So after we meet and have our little soiree here, our good friend Brooke will, that's my niece's name, Brooke will upload this into the DLGF, and it'll all be accessible through the DLGF. So that will be by clicking this link. It's not active right now. You'll be able to get in there and see the current budget, and that is also what's advertised throughout the state. And then, so what you're giving us, permission essentially after tonight is just to kind of throw it out there. We will have our public hearing on the 24th, and then we will make a decision on the budget in the October meeting. So that's just kind of how the process works. Is there anything that I missed or anything I totally jumbled up? Brooke?
No, I think you're fine. You did a great job. And all these forms feed into that Form 4B to compute, the rates and the budget estimates and whatnot. So I think those were in your packets if you have any questions on those.
Yeah, you do have all of them.
And some of the rates could change slightly just because miscellaneous revenues are estimates. So if the DLGF applies the true one later, once they have more data, then that could change it a little bit. But that would come into play in December.
Right.
When you talk to them.
Right. So you also will see and again, this is one of the things that's kind of left over from the old days when we had a capital projects fund and we had a transportation fund. I just gave you paper copies because honestly, the way they create these forms, if I put them on a PowerPoint, it's nearly impossible to see them. So you have a paper copy. We'll look through capital projects first. And again, this is just kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, a guesstimation of what we may be spending money on. I know that we will be doing parking lot repairs. I know we will do something with roofs. I know I know those things are going to be a part of what we're looking at. And talking a little bit with Lisa Wallen, there are some concerns we have in the auditorium, so we're trying to make some plans for that over a couple of years to make some updates. We also know that the fence, we have some fences to repair, especially back near baseball where there's been snowplows hit fences, different things like that. Buses hit fences, different things. So we know, those are things we're going to look at. Again, these are all just general estimates. And if you're taking a look at the next page, actually 2 pages, sorry, this kind of gives a little bit more detail on what we would be looking at for very large expenses. Again, these may happen, these may not happen, but as part of the process we have to go through with this budget, we have to outline these costs.
We're telling the state, this is why we need
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And
just saying why we came up with that number.
right. Well, yes and no, because honestly, Brooke has gone through and tried to,
Incorporate
budget
everything for
for
2025.
that.
Yeah.
but that may look different once we go through the whole process, after we go through the finalization and everything. Yes, correct. Yes. And so basically that is capital projects. Any questions about capital projects? Bus replacement, as you are all aware, we did pass the GEO bond last year that we are using to fund our bus replacement. We are not scheduled to replace any buses for 2025. 2026, we are replacing 2 buses, and then 2027, 2 buses, and just kind of, generating out there from that perspective. Now, again, just because we put it in here doesn't mean that we have to do it. We're again just showing our plan. We're showing that we're looking at how to maintain our fleet and how we want to move forward. Now, again, I think the 25, 26, and one of the buses for the 27 will be paid for with GEO bond proceeds. So that would be the 7 buses that we talked about when we passed the GEO bond. So that's, we would have, if we end up buying 2 buses in 27, then we would need to come up with the money out of operations to purchase those buses in 27, that bus in 27. That makes sense. They're smaller. So yeah. So the C2s are the ones that have the nose, and then we have the pushers that are crazy expensive. Yeah, no, and honestly, we're adding about $10,000 to what the actual cost is right now. So hopefully it won't be that much, but they've gone up dramatically even in the time that I've been here. So
Can you repeat what you said? We don't have to do what?
we don't purchase any buses this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
thought there was something
25.
else.
Yeah,
When you said
25.
about the plan, we didn't, sorry.
No,
Misunderstood.
so 26, we'll use, to buy the 2 buses in 26, and then 1 bus in 27, we'd use the GEO bond proceeds to cover that. And then if we decided to buy a second bus in 27, that would have to be funded out of operations. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Any questions on that? Again, I don't know how closely anyone looks at this. We submit it. We never hear anything about it. So I'm assuming we're doing it all right. So, but that's, again, one of those things that is a little bit left over from the old days and how we used to come up with dollars for specific projects and buses. Okay. Any questions? Is everybody excited and pumped? All right. Going on to the next item. Exit out of here. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about with managing the debt service tax rate. I will say, when we started these projects, there was a different number that was allowable than what the number is now. That changed with the legislature in the last budget, where we were locked in at a rate of, for debt service, for instance, at 41 cents, 4185. The legislature decided that if we have a rate over 40 cents, then we have to do a bunch of other things. And that happened in the interim of all of these different projects that came about. And I've got that information in here. So part of this and part of the concern that came out of this is because the rules changed, honestly. So what I'll show you is basically our historical debt service rate. So you see that 4185, which is that magic number that we've talked about. We were a little bit below it here, and we will still be below it here. However, they changed, they changed the rules a little bit on, let me find that specific part. Anyway, so it's Section 6 of House Bill Enrolled Act 499. And basically what it says is debt service rate over 40 cents. If you're going to have a debt service rate over 40 cents, then you must go through 2 public hearings and then potentially have a potential petition remonstrance if someone would request that. Again, this kind of happened after all of this was established, which is why we kind of have to go back now and fix it. Okay. So be glad to share any information with any of you about that particular legislation. Be glad to have any discussion there. But it really did kind of create a bit of an issue for us moving forward. So again, our expected is 41 cents, essentially 42 cents. So, well, the reason why, some of this is, a little bit more expensive this year is because we're paying off a GEO bond. The way those bonds were structured back in 2017, we've paid interest for most of the life of those bonds. We've had to pay principal the last 2 years. So we're paying off the biggest part of those bonds over the last 2 years. So that causes a little bit of a blip in the rate. And this comes from Baker Tilly and just kind of gives you that outline. This is not the most recent, but it kind of gives you an idea of why we're here and why this has kind of happened. So you'll notice here, so pay 25, you have here the principals for the GEO bonds that crept in here. It was pretty much non-existent here. And then they're like, boom, here we are. And then also we have the debt that we issued for the building projects that are coming on. So we knew we were going to be at that 41.85 or close to it when we went through all of this. And I mean, it's even projected out that we would be at that 41.85. So everything should be smooth. Everything will be great. Then our friends passed this at the legislature. And I'll be very honest, I would prefer to avoid the whole petition remonstrance process, especially for the amount of money we're talking about to get us under 40 cents. So in talking to Jeff Quackenbush and also talking to Baker Tilly, their recommendations are to use operating balance from our debt service in order to lower our rate from that 41 cents down to 39 cents. Now, when we send out this budget, it's going to look different than that. But when we get our 7280 or our 1782 form in December, we will revise it and lower the operating balance that we're anticipating in order to cover the rate to knock it down to 39 cents. Am I explaining that well?
Yes, good job. Yeah, they'll apply the true AV for 2025 against that, and then we'll ask for less than operating balance, and that will reduce it.
I need to understand it because I'm still not there.
Okay.
So you're saying when you would be using the operation, when you say operating balance, are you talking about the operations fund?
No,
Debt
it's,
service.
this is the debt service cash balance that we carry
Yes.
over all the time. And so we will actually go under that 15% that they like for us to have in for cash balance. Which is why we would go ahead and pass the potential for an additional appropriation out of rainy day if something crazy happened and we didn't collect the tax dollars that we anticipated.
So the 15 is what we're keeping as a balance. It's not necessary, like, how are we paying debt service if we take it from?
It's just what's left over. So essentially what they're saying is there were times back, I guess it would be the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, where there were all kinds of delays in getting tax revenue. So, which caused a lot of school corporations to go out and have to get loans in order to make their debt service payments. So the DLGF came up with a percentage that we have to have with a cash balance in order to not have to go out and get a bank loan to cover any delay in tax collection.
So after we complete this, though, does our rate increase again, our levy, or it stays below the,
It will go below.
it will
Yeah.
go below, but I
Yeah.
mean, it stays there at this.
Yeah, it will go below. And I have invited Baker Tilly to come to a work session on the 24th after our public hearing. So they will give you a lot of information that I can't even begin to
Okay.
talk to you about because it's complex stuff. So basically what we're looking at is, so we are going to say that in December 2025, our projected balance, which we're going to submit as part of our information that will be generated, which will generate the 1782 form at $507,000. In order to manage the rate to get under 40 cents, we will have to drop the operating balance down to 345,000. Okay? And that's just something where when we get the 1782, we just ask for a revision and we tell them why we're doing that. And then we've actually done that before. But they will make that adjustment and then the budget will be the budget. So this is kind of the general rules about operating balance. And you can see any debt that was issued after 2014, they want to have a cash operating balance of 15% of whatever your debt service amount is. So you're asking, well, how do we, part of this is, again, managing the rate is also keeping in mind what the assessed valuation looks like. As you can see, we were kind of cruising along here at pretty low assessed valuation rates. And then the real estate, explosion happened. So during the 3-year assessment period, we have had considerable increases in AV. The likelihood for next year, because we'll be done with the 3-year reassessment cycle, will be we're probably not going to see a double-digit increase in AV. And then there's also talk from our friends at the legislature about capping, tax rate for seniors, doing all these different things for property tax relief, which is really going to affect us and local government. I am sure they will try to figure out some way to recuperate dollars that we may be losing, but I've played this game long enough to know that we never get back what they take away. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see how all that flies. But that's a little bit of just kind of that general assessed evaluation, and we're really where we are as far as that increase in AV. So basically, using the 25 assessed evaluation, we would reduce the debt service operating balance down to that 345,000, which would drop our rate down to 39.97. And at that point, there would be no reason to do the 2 public hearings and to go through the potential of a petition remonstrance process. We have really high tax collection rates. Many of our residential taxes are escrowed, like mine, And so we do have a really high level of collection. And so what I'm trying to say in that situation is I feel like with the rate of collection that we've had consistently and reducing that operating balance a little bit, I think we're going to be fine. But just to make sure, we would do an additional appropriation out of rainy day that we would only use if we had to. But it would be just for that amount. That would be the difference between what we would have of the operating balance and the 15%. So roughly 100,000. But I don't anticipate having to use that. So after the 15th of 2025, we pay off the general obligation bond in 2017. After that, our rate goes down significantly, like 35 cents. So we need to decide what we want to do at that point. We want to let the rate go down. We want to maintain the rate, which would mean issuance of additional debt. There are a lot of things that we have to think about in that situation. I gave you guys a lot of other information in your packet, but I decided that I wanted to make sure, and I think you all know that I'm somebody who likes to get information out early, and we've got a lot of time to consider our options. I just wanted to get that information out to you early to show you what could potentially use, what we could use, some additional geo bond or whatever we would choose to do, how we would use those funds. So that's kind of where we are. And that would be primarily what Baker Tilly would talk about on the 24th, talking about those options. And again, you can decide as a board that we just want to let the rate go down. Or, you know, the only thing I would caution with that is letting the rate go down. It's really hard to get it back up. The other part of it is I believe there will be some restrictions coming from the State House that will make it even more challenging after July 1. So it's my job to make you aware of those things, and I would not be doing my job correctly if I didn't. Yes. Yeah.
But our, legal rate will still be 41.85.
If they don't pass that 40 cents over the next 2 years, you're right.
If we don't, shrink that rate, operational balance, would the 41.85 cover our $4 million debt?
Yeah.
That's probably a calculation for the
Yeah.
future, because you.
Yeah,
have
I mean,
to- you have
but
to look
I
at
think
the-
what you're saying, I think yes.
Yeah,
If we went through that process, we don't want to go through the legislature just passed. Would
Right.
we have enough money at 40? Because the advertised rate I know is.
Oh, yes,
what the
yes.
rate is, but
Right.
the
That's-
advertised rate's really high.
Right.
That's
50.
just, yeah, we will have, we will have enough to make all of the payments and then have the $345,000 left come December of 25.
I
Is
thought
that what
you were
you're
asking? A
asking?
different question, I'm sorry.
Okay,
If we don't take the 500,000 down to 345,
okay,
and we go through that legislative process,
Mhm.
the petition,
Mhm.
and the rate goes to 41.85, because that's what we can legally do if we follow the process, right? We can go above 40 cents if we jump through their hoops.
correct.
Will the 41.85 raise us enough money to make our payment? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I think I would want somebody that understands that a whole lot better than I do to answer that question.
Okay.
for you.
I get it. You don't have the math in front of you.
I'll be really honest.
We have two options, right?
Yeah.
Go through the process and make the payment and keep the balance above 15%,
Mhm.
or shrink that balance and keep it below the 40 cents so we don't have to go to.
Right.
So then that leads me to my next question. Maybe you know the answer to this one. The 15%, you talk like it's a suggestion.
It is. It's not something that's required. It is the guideline that the DLGF follows.
Is there any, like, like our bond rating or our status with DLGF, or is there any? negative-
There's no negative impacts for
Okay.
that, because honestly, when we do the 26 budget, we will go ahead and put that 15%, that 15% operating balance will come back. So it's just kind of hoping for the 1 year that there's not any surprises as far as tax collection.
So that was my next question. So we'll budget into the tax rate, the debt collection, the debt service enough to refund the balance and make the payments in the future.
In 26, yes.
Okay.
Because that's, I mean, the 15% is the gold standard. That's really where we want to be. Again, if it's a little bit of a gamble, I'm not gonna tell you it's not, which is why we would want to try to do an additional appropriation just in case something horrific would happen. But I really think if history is any kind of an indicator, we should not have any issues with tax collection. So anyway, it's a lot of information, guys, and I am not the expert. I try really hard to be the expert, but
I don't expect you to know all the answers. I mean,
Yeah.
you answered the one question before I even asked it, but I know it's, and then they changed the rules in the middle of the game, so I get it.
And I really think, and the one thing that I love about Belvia and our friends at Baker Tilly is they just understand this. I mean, this is just what they do. So they're able to ask and answer, the questions to help us get where we need to go.
They had knowledge of the legislation
Yes,
changing.
they do.
Stood in front of us and issued debt and never bothered to tell us we'd be in this position. So the board needs to be aware of that as well.
Exactly.
Who did?
Baker
Oh,
Tilly and
right.
Jeff and everybody.
Right.
No, they knew this legislation was here. They knew this meeting would have to happen, and our advisors never mentioned it to us. I went back and watched all the videos. It's not in there. So they can come up and talk to us, but I'd be careful about how much we rely on that completely, because they knew this was coming and let us do the debt.
He even told me that if we were short, we would just have to vote
That's right.
legally. We would be obligated to vote to raise the 4185 rate, that was the solution.
Right. But again, that was kind of under a different set of rules too. So that's part of it.
That was 2023.
Yeah.
And the legislation passed in February of 2023. So he knew what that was.
So that was May of this year that he told me that.
Well, exactly, and the legislation passed. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's, right, but
And to your point about if we go down to 35 cents, what concerns me is the AV.
Sure.
Because we're already seeing parts of the country where AVs are going down. And I think here in Indiana, we're a little more insulated because we didn't have, but 12 to 15% is obviously not the norm.
Right.
But it's not what some people had. But I'm very concerned that it doesn't just return to 1 or 2%, it
Well,
could go negative.
some of us that are old, kind of remember what happened in the early 80s when you had, especially the price of farm ground that was sky high, and then the bottom dropped out. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But that would be the kind of thing that we definitely need to keep a very close eye on. Okay. Well, that's it for my dog and pony show, guys. So I believe we have comments from the.
All right, Mrs. Satang, you're up.
I'm not gonna pretend that I understood everything that was said in the budget. I just kind of want to reassure, I mean, so when you're talking the 0.5 whatever, that's what the taxpayer is paying, correct? No, yes, I mean, the tax rate increase, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, and I guess I can research more as to how all this $4 million debt service stuff impacts the taxpayer as far as reimbursing or paying it back.
We try to keep
Yeah, and I get that. I get that.
and so I think five was where we
Yeah.
need to stay below.
And I get that. It's just if you know, it's really interesting when you look at our census, right? And you look at the population of people in that census. And Tipton does have a high proportion of elderly people, okay? Fixed incomes and everything like that. Obviously, our enrollment rate is decreasing. We're not growing. I know other schools in the state are facing the reality of consolidating, right? I'll leave it there because I know it's a very controversial. I didn't go to school here, so I don't understand why there's two big corporations in one little county, but I didn't go here, so maybe it's something I don't understand. Okay, that's just I just wanted to bring that to the attention. I mean, the census, again, is something, if you want to know what your community looks like, it's very telling. And our population is decreasing, the birth rate, like you said, and all of that. And it's concerning because, I mean, like I take care of I'm a caregiver for my 86-year-old mom. And every time we go to the store, there's always inevitably someone in front of us in line, an elderly person that can't afford milk or something and has to put it back. So when we're talking about renewing a bond and increasing debt, I just think, and I know you do, that's not what I'm trying to say, but we need to keep that in mind because inflation is real and people are suffering and can't afford food. So, okay, enough about that. Do we have an update on the Inferno funding, like how much we've actually collected? Yeah, I was just curious because I see little bits here and there being added to replace what was taken out. And then the publication with the whole budget plan. Do we know what publication it'll be put in? Is it the little Tipton paper or will it be the Kokomo Tribune or? Okay, and we can get that. I got it. Okay, and there was one more question. So the budget, this is gonna be like everything, right? Like salary, I mean, just, okay. That's okay. I just think we need to kind of look at our overhead as far as positions and things, given our decrease, but I'll save that for later.
Okay, and with that, we will adjourn our work session and begin our regular scheduled meeting in just a minute. Good evening and welcome to the Tipton Community School Corporation School Board meeting for this evening. We're just so thankful that you could all join us. I'd like to call our meeting to order and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Andrea will lead us in that and our vision statement.
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Growing empowered, future-ready students who are prepared for a lifetime of opportunity and success.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to just kind of open the floor for board members to tell us something good that you've seen in our school corporation or just ways our school has been involved in the community. Like to go first?
I would like to say to Dr. Glaze, getting the agenda and documents earlier has been tremendously helpful. Getting those on Fridays before really was difficult for me, and so even if they trickle in, it helps to get them earlier.
Way our student, thank you, Eric, thank you. I'd really like to share that I'm grateful for how our students are greeted each morning. I have students that I drop off, so I don't see the folks in the back, but I know that the folks in the back are greeted each and every day with an administrator, likely Mrs. Crawford. But what I see each day is I see staff welcoming the elementary school. I see an administrator out there each and every day. I see administrators at the middle school and the high school, and I'm grateful for the first names that are used each and every day as students get out of vehicles. I'm grateful for the effort that's put forth both in the front of our building and the back of our building.
I would like to share something that Corey Vernine forwarded to me yesterday afternoon, and these will obviously be Blue Future Awards here in the future. This is from the athletic director at Twin Lakes. We had a player get injured on Friday night at Twin Lakes on a scary hit. Dr. Condit and assistant football coach and Mr. Emmert, our athletic trainer, came onto the field to assist our trainers in stabilizing the player and getting him off the field. We called the ambulance, Dr. Condit, and it was nice enough to accompany the injured player to the ambulance and explain what happened to the EMS personnel to pass along to the ER doctor. We appreciate them helping out in what was a scary situation. Thank you, Dr. Condit and Mr. Emmert. So again, we want to honor them. We didn't have enough time to really get that to happen, but I thought it was important that we recognize our great people. So very nice. It's always great to get those. And again, just thank you to the two of them for doing such a great job.
Anyone else?
I think we have to also applaud and thank the many groups and people, teachers, staff, students who represented our school so well at the various Pork Festival events this past weekend, both at the parade and serving in various volunteer roles. I think that being involved in our community is so important, and our students did that with gusto.
So true. Okay, thank you. Just great times to be a Blue Devil. Next on our agenda are comments from the community, and we did not have anyone sign up, so we'll move on to approving our consent agenda items, which includes approval of the agenda, the approval of minutes from our regular meeting on August 13th, our approval of claims from payroll on August 16th and 30th, and accounts payable claims for September 10th. Approval of the personnel report for September and approval of field trips for the high school cheerleaders to Disney World Orlando, Florida, the high school YO trip to Disney World Orlando, Florida, the high school senior trip to New York City, and then donations. Approval to accept donations from Friends of the Inferno, the Blackbaud Giving Fund, My Closet, Coca-Cola, Summer Academy, and FFA. We just really want to thank every person involved in those donations. It's just really appreciated and really so thankful for the way it influences our students. So at this time, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. On our personnel report for this evening, under certified staff, we have a recommendation for Linda Buckley as the temporary second grade teacher at the elementary school. Under classified staff, we have a medical leave request for David Heath as a corporation bus driver, and resignations for Jamie Dunlop as a special education paraeducator at the elementary, and Laura Fulton as the administrative assistant at the administration office. We have a recommendation for Chris Swink as the cafeteria worker at the high school. And lastly, for our ECA staff is a recommendation for Diane Mass to be the yearbook sponsor at the middle school. Okay. This time, the board will recess from the regular business meeting for the purpose of conducting a brief public hearing. Do I have a motion for recess?
I move to recess for the public hearing. Excuse me.
Okay,
Second that.
thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, for the beginning of our public hearing, once again, this is something that we would typically have to have a separate meeting for, but legislators allowed us to do this during a regular monthly meeting. So anyway, this is basically a public hearing to say, hey, we're going to start collective bargaining. So I hereby call to order the public hearing to begin the formal bargaining process between Tipton Community School Corporation and the Tipton Education Association. Prior to the beginning of today's public hearing, patrons were permitted to sign up to give public testimony. Public testimony during this hearing will be heard regarding teacher compensation only for no longer than 3 minutes per speaker. And we have had no one sign up. So at this point, this would conclude the public hearing regarding the start of the formal bargaining. Stop laughing. The official time period for collective bargaining will begin September 15th through November 15th. Do I have a motion to adjourn public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we're not voting. All right, this will be fun. So do I have a,
Jen,
Yeah.
could we just, so the public knows, they don't get to know the donations for the Inferno. We had a very generous donation from our construction partner that is in this month's packet. So not only did they do a great job on the facility, they gave back to us, and they don't get to see the details of that, but you should know that, you know, they gave back to us. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to let that go, but
Yeah.
now we can do whatever.
no, thank you, Rob, for highlighting
Do
that.
what we're gonna do.
No, that's good. Thanks for highlighting that. Do I have a motion to convene the regular business meeting?
Move to reconvene.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, we will move into the superintendent's report and some awards.
So I thought we'd go ahead and start with our Blue Future Awards. The first person that we wanted to recognize, again, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that make this school work. And we have had an incredibly smooth start to our school year. I mean, literally the first day of school, we were able to dismiss kids at about 3:15, which I think is completely unheard of, and everybody got home. So, and that is really a tribute to Lori Crawford, who has spent a whole lot of time working behind the scenes to get the kids on the right bus, communicate with parents, to communicate with bus drivers, and to really make all the things happen behind the scenes. And again, it takes a team. It's not just one individual. It's also our bus drivers. It's also our administrators. It's everyone. But it is certainly what Lori does, and as organized as she's been, we wanted to make sure we honored her with a Blue Future Award. So.
Snuck it in there.
Yeah, that's the.
I can't see the camera can't see me, right? Okay.
For our next Blue Future Award, I wanted to nominate Rob Cochran. Believe it or not, this is a huge time commitment to be a board member, and I am so appreciative of all our board members and the time they take to do the job that they do. And then you have crazy people like Rob who decide to serve on statewide committees to do even more of this stuff. So I did want to thank Rob. He works on the legislative committee and he talks to us, and then he turns around and talks to legislators. And it really is beneficial for us to have that liaison, and it certainly helps us be able to communicate what we need at the school. So we're very fortunate to have Rob do this, and it's starting on his second year serving in this role. I want to thank him for serving the first. So, Rob Cochran.
I would like to honor this evening Mr. Robertson and Carter Marshke and Jack Roach, if those three gentlemen join us at the front. For those of you who have had the honor of attending an event in the newly renovated Inferno, these three gentlemen are responsible for being at the controls of very sophisticated software. Mr. Robertson has taken that responsibility by the horns, and I know about this much of the time that he spent. Our girls volleyball team has been the first group that has been playing in the Inferno, and so they've kind of been the guinea pig.
They've been helpful.
I'm sure they were very involved in what they were. I'm sure of that. And so Mr. Robertson has been wonderful at designing the graphics, figuring out what all that software can do, and that's only going to grow. And then Carter and Jack were the first two who were willing to step forward in Mr. Robertson's publications class, correct? To be trained and then to run that software. And it has been a joy to be a spectator at those events and see how awesome it is. And I'm excited to see what it will be. So as students, for you to take that extra time to do it, we're really grateful for that. So future awards for Mr. John Robertson, Mr. Jack Roach, and Mr.
Thank you. Class of 1998. Wow. I'm not even going to say what year my graduation. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, you want me to? So, for this month, I wanted to nominate, the yearbook staff. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to get their yearbook or get it home and take a look at it. But for a school our size, it was just unbelievably well done. The professionalism, the thoroughness, very inclusive of all the different things that we have here. And I was just really impressed with it. So I invited, Lucy Lightfoot, Dylan, and Noah Hummerkaus, and everybody else playing sports. So I'm standing here, but I would like to recognize Senior for the yearbook. And if you get a chance to take a look at it, it's just really well done. and worth every cent we spent on it, so it's great. So, I can give him this. and
Oh,
then,
absolutely.
Yeah, just
Yes.
let
Yeah.
him give these out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Forget your check.
She works for free.
I don't know what they're thinking.
I'm vaguely familiar with her. She volunteered to come along. There you go. A new step, but I appreciate it. So you do a great job. Thank you so much.
I'll just keep them, and that way I'll.
Got it.
Unless they want
Okay.
to hear about the.
At this time, if you are here to receive an award, I would love to give you the opportunity to not stay for the rest of the board meeting unless you really would like to. But if not, you're also welcome
Nobody
to
stays.
leave. So thank you, and we'll move on with the superintendent's report.
Well, I'm actually going to turn this over to Mr. Jaworski because he is going to talk about our strategic plan. As you are all very aware, we've been working on the strategic plan for a bit. I feel like it's been very well done, and I'm really proud of what it looks like. And again, I think it is something for our whole corporation to be very proud of. So I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Jaworski, and I will now be quiet.
Thank you very much. So I actually had a conversation with Dr. Glaze a little bit earlier today, about how we come with this, how we got into this strategic plan. And he said something that really resonated with me about how this is probably one of the most important things we do in education. There's a lot of busy work, particularly in administration, that we do, managing budgets, managing grants, dealing with policy and whatnot. But when it comes down to how are we going to impact students, this strategic plan is probably the number one thing that we can do as a district. And so, like I said, we spent a lot of time on it, something that we're very proud of and something we're happy to share with you today. So again, the strategic plan spans for the years 2024 to 2027, these next 3 school years. Again, the process, how we got to this point, last winter, the school board met to set priorities for the district. What's most important to us over the next 3 years. District administration then took those priorities and put together goals for the next 3 years. Building leadership then took those goals and developed building leadership goals. Again, that is going to drive the school improvement plans that each of the building principals talk about today. We then requested feedback from the board, see things that lined up, things that didn't quite match expectations, and we kind of made those tweaks. And now is our kind of formal submission of this strategic plan. Actually, Dr. Lace has a really nice presentation that we're going to eventually share on the district website for the community to review. A little bit nicer than this presentation I was able to put together. So again, the school board's priorities for the next 3 years focus on these 3 things: student achievement, communication, and professional learning. Right? Obviously, student achievement speaks for itself. Communication is communication between the school and home. And then professional learning is how do we develop our staff to get the most out of them, to get the most out of our students. So again, kind of our belief statements and goals. This was actually pulled from or inspired by the values and beliefs of Tipton Community Schools over the past decades. This is kind of summarizing those more or less. So our student achievement belief is that we believe that all students can learn and achieve. This is only made possible when students are in attendance and actively engage in their learning process. Again, we want to make sure students get here. We want to make sure that we're providing them a quality product when they are here. With that, our goals, 2 goals related to student achievement are by the end of the 26-27 school year, each building will attain their academic achievement or growth goal established in each building's school improvement plan. So again, hard to be specific because between the elementary, middle, and high school, vastly different, academic achievement measures. So we wanted to be specific about wanting to see them achieve their goals, but we didn't want to be too restricted as exactly what that goal needed to be in each building. So again, we want to make sure that with each school improvement plan that they are attaining that goal. The second one, a little bit more specific, TCSC will have at least 80% of students that attending school at least 94% of the time they are enrolled. So again, how the state measures quote unquote good attendance is 94%. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's you can miss up to 10 days. That's 94% attendance or better. So that's what we're shooting for. We want to have 80% of our kids miss less than 10 days of school over the course of the school year. Again, if students are not here, it's harder for them to learn. So again, that's one of our goals. As far as communication goes, under that priority, our communication belief is we believe in family and community collaboration, and we believe that interpersonal and social relationships are necessary to ensure student success both within and outside of our buildings. So again, our 3 goals related to communication, all TCSC families will receive regular communication from both administration and their child's teachers. We recognize that this has improved over the past handful of years. I know we have regular newsletters that go out from each building. I know in several buildings we have staff communication, whether that's a newsletter in the elementary, whether that's phone calls in the middle school or high school, emails. Again, that regular communication is great, but again, we want to see increased regular communication. And again, they'll detail that in each of the building improvement plans. For the 26-27 school year, TCSC will will provide opportunities for community representation on advisory committees. This is actually one we kind of went back and forth on a bit, simply because we were trying to find one that was more meaningful to our community. Simply offering more opportunities to come into school, while we are going to offer that, we felt like the community wanted something a little bit different, maybe something a little more meaningful and impactful on what happens in our schools. And so one thing we came up with was finding ways to get our community involved in some of the decision-making processes that happen here. Again, building with that transparency and working collaboratively between family and school. That's a real big focus for our schools over the next few years. And then again, by the end of the 26-27 school year, our last communication goal, TCSD will effectively and frequently highlight students and staff in school and extracurricular achievements. You might have noticed this already. And again, we'll detail this more specifically by building. Our social media is becoming a very popular thing. We are posting things, if not daily, every other day or so. There's a lot of things going on, not just athletically with our new athletic Facebook page and Instagram account, but also within our academics as well that are being shared by our building principals. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that specifically here in a bit. The last priority is professional learning belief. We believe professional development is essential for all staff, and our students deserve instruction that is founded in evidence-based best practices from well-trained staff. Again, we want to make sure our students are getting the best, so we need to make sure that we are providing that continued learning experience for our teachers. By the end of the 26-27 school year, all staff will receive formal feedback on their adherence to the Tipton Way. Again, part of putting out your best is adhering to certain principles, certain beliefs that are going to drive you day in and day out. We will talk about those individually by building here in just a bit. But again, the Tipton Way is a list of about 6 different values that we expect out of all staff. And that is something that is going to be not just reviewed in observation evaluation meetings at the end of each semester, end of each school year, but also is something that each building is incorporating in a monthly or even weekly basis. And then finally, our last goal regarding professional learning is that TCSC professional staff will earn at least 50 hours of professional development each year. Again, that's something that incorporates our PLCs, our staff meetings, our district PD days, our summer academy opportunities, our partnership with Wabash Valley Education Center, making sure that our staff have regular development over these next 3 years, because again, high quality staff is going to lead to better results for our students. Now, with that said, we're going to talk about the Tipton Elementary Strategic Plan. Both Mr. Johnson and Ms. Wigginton were unavailable tonight for personal reasons, so I will go ahead and step in as the voice of the elementary today. So for student achievement goal number 1, again, 2 student achievement goals, 3 communication goals, and then 2 professional learning goals. For the elementary, there's 2 things you really look at for achievement. That's iLearn and that's iRead. And with the changes in law with iRead, that's why we've made this kind of a top priority next to iLearn. By the end of the 26-27 school year, Tipton Elementary's achievement goals are going to be as follows. 2nd grade iRead 3, we're looking for at least a 70% passing rate or on track to pass for that. Again, what that means is there's 3 results of iRead 3 for 2nd graders. You can either pass it and you don't have to take it against 3rd grader. You can be on track, which means you're doing great, but you didn't quite pass it yet. But again, regular education is going to get you there by the end of 3rd grade year. If you did not pass and you're not on track, you're an at-risk student there. That's where that gives us a heads up. It says, hey, this student needs some additional support. Let's make sure we target those students over the course of the next year. And again, that we were able to opt in on that the last couple of years. This year beginning is now mandatory for all second graders across the state to take the iRead 3. Again, not a bad idea. I'm not a huge fan of additional testing, but this is something that if they're going to start holding students and families accountable for students to pass iRead 3 or else you'd be retained, the more information we get on these students the earlier, the better. For third grade iRead 3, we had a 93% pass rate. We celebrated that this summer. We've now set a goal of 95% pass rate for our third graders. Again, it's a very lofty goal. It's something I'm excited for us to attain. And I know Mr. Johnson, Ms. Wigginton are also excited to have our students attain at that level. And then for third to fifth grade, those are the only 3 grade levels that take the iLearn. We're looking for a math pass rate of 70% over those 3 grade levels and a reading pass rate of 55%. Student achievement goal number 2, again, this is where we're trying to set a goal here for the elementary, 75%. And I know we got a question before about why is that not 80%. We want to make sure when we set SMART goals that it's not just, shooting for the moon. It's something that's also very realistic and practical. Jumping even 5% over a single year is quite remarkable. And we saw growth last year. So to go from where we were at last year, which is I believe around 63%, 65%, I can't remember off the top of my head, to jump up to that 80%, I don't know how quite attainable that's going to be in just 3 years. I think that is a long-term goal for us, but I think over the next 3 years, getting to 75%, if elementary can hit 75%, I guarantee that our middle school and high school are going to go well past that 80%, and we will hit our 80% as an entire district. Strategies that we're going to utilize to attain that: good and perfect attendance awards, again, celebrating the kids who are getting here on time, the kids who and families that are helping get kids here to learn. Visual attendance trackers, something that's already started popping up in the elementary. Students are already talking about in the hallways about, oh, we're at this percentage. How do we get a little bit better? Again, just making people aware, I think, is something different than we've done in the past, emphasizing the importance of getting to school and being here again. And then finally, behavioral support plans. If it gets to the point where it's a won't, not necessarily a can't get here, then we start working with students, start working with families on how can we as a school support you to get your kid here. And if you can't get your kid here, how do we support them remotely? Because again, even if you can't get here for any particular personal reason, whether it be medical or otherwise, we don't want students to miss out on their education. So again, making sure that we work with families that way. The first of 3 communication goals: all TES families will receive regular communication by both administration and the child's teachers. That's newsletters, student staff spotlights, and then multiple modes of communication, whether that's email, newsletters, texts. I think the elementary does a really good job of this already, but it's a matter of being mindful of that and keeping on top of that. And again, emphasizing that positive communication, positive two-way communication between our schools and our families. Communication goal number 2, again, in that 26-27 school year, TES will provide opportunities for community representation on advisory committees. This would be on interview committees, right? When we hire new staff, we like to get the opinions of our community as well. Curriculum adoption, we've been doing this for a few years, but continuing that, we actually have a reading adoption curriculum this year. I think we have 4 different families being a part of that one. TESO, again, working with TESO, making sure that we have a strong relationship with them. They support a lot of opportunities and activities we have in the school. And then finally, parent advisory committee. This is something that's going to be new. Mr. Johnson and Ms. Wigginton are working to put together an advisory committee just to get feedback and regular communication directly from families about how things are working in the elementary, how we can make things better for kids. And in that 26-27 year, TES will effectively and frequently highlight more students and staff in school and extracurricular accomplishments. They already have weekly and monthly Pride winners. That's something that's on the announcements every Friday. And obviously we have the Pride meetings in the elementary gymnasium each month to give awards to those Pride winners. Quarterly attendance awards, again, is new. That's something that they're looking forward to. Again, recognizing and celebrating students, not just for their achievement, but also growth in attendance as well. Again, you fall behind early in the year because you get sick and all of a sudden you can't improve your attendance rate. It's not going to be perfect. That's okay. We're looking for growth. We're looking for improvement quarter to quarter, particularly as we shared earlier this summer. That third quarter is always where we see the hardest hits for attendance. If we can see growth, not just within the year, but across multiple years, that's something that we can celebrate as well. Lunchroom Pride incentives. I know Ms. Soul leads that for the elementary. That's a huge point of emphasis this year. TES Shining staff member. That's something that each month our elementary staff give an award to one another for being the shining star. And then that ties into the Tipton Way. Mr. Johnson has got set up for our staff, and then regular social media posts. Our elementary does an excellent job. I'm fairly certain it's daily at this point. Just going in, taking pictures of what's happening in our classrooms, what our students are doing, not just inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom. That is worth celebrating. So again, great work there. For the professional learning goal, in the 26-27 year, all TES staff will receive that formal feedback on their TCSC expectations. They're actually going to integrate that, like I mentioned, on the monthly staff meetings when they give that Shining Star Award. Each month, it's going to be related to each different element of the TCSC expectations. Again, that's something that we're pretty excited for, pretty excited to see our staff recognize and keep that in the forefront of their mind throughout the year. Aligning to PLC norms, again, what we do day in and day out, how we operate in our collaborative teams, that's something that's going to be emphasized using the TCSC expectations. And then part of every law and observation feedback, like I mentioned, at each semester, we provide a law and observation feedback for staff that will be incorporated. The feedback on those Tipton Way will be incorporated on that as well. So finally, with professional development at the elementary, all TES professional staff, again, will earn those 50 hours. Like I mentioned, that's weekly PLCs, monthly staff meetings, district PD days, summer academy, and the targeted Wabash Valley PD opportunities. So again, a mouthful, there's a lot there. Again, this is a very dense plan, but it's comprehensive, and it's something that we feel is going to move the needle on student achievement over the next 3 years. So that is for Tipton Elementary. We'll pass it over to Mr. Ayers.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? So wonderful to chat with you guys all tonight and to be able to share our Tipton Middle School strategic plan. One thing that I will say kind of before I get started is, this is one thing that we created collaboratively, obviously, with you guys, with ourselves as an administrative team. You will see a lot of stuff that looks kind of similar across a lot of our buildings. Why? Because I once learned as a teacher, good teachers create, great teachers steal. And so, we steal from each other. We say, hey, if that's working there, then let's go ahead and figure out how we can make it work in our building too. So if you see anything and you're like, that looks a lot like what the elementary is doing, yeah, because we worked on it together to be able to build a school that works. Not to mention, of course, that creates continuity for our families when they go from building to building to building and they say, oh, I know how this works because that's how it was working down there too. So but obviously, this first one is one that might look a little bit different. So our TMS student achievement goal, and frankly, this is the one that I could probably take apart for the longest amount of time. It's the one that I think is the biggest reach for us. We really have two achievement goals. One is kind of a baseline one. The first one, I'll just read: year over year, TMS passing rates will not decline on iLearn, ELA, or math. It is the story of middle school years that iLearn rates decline. That's true across the country. I think that anyone here who has had middle schoolers know that as their world gets bigger and they have the opportunity to make choices, freedom doesn't always lead to the best choices, or, they have changing priorities, right? And so that has been the story for us as a middle school, and frankly, it's a story for all middle schools, but it's going to be change. And I'll kind of, after I also go through the stretch goal, talk about kind of what our different strategies are and talk just really briefly about sort of where we are in the midst of both of these. Our stretch goal, which again, by the end of 26-27 school year, this is really where we want to be getting to, is that 55% of our students will be passing iLearn for ELA. You can see what our current numbers are there. And again, I'll speak a little bit to where we sort of are there in a little bit, as well as we want 55% of students who, to be passing iLearn for math as well. So a lot of the strategies that are kind of going to be a part of this, we really have, I would say, 6 strategies that are kind of things that we're doing. It's also a little bit interesting because some of the strategies that we're doing actually were on their way to be implemented really in the 22-23 school year, and then kind of came into more fruition during last school year. And then, of course, we were developing these strategic plans. That's a mouthful. And so it's been kind of cool to see. And I'll finish off talking about the achievement goal with kind of where we are on these, that we're actually already seeing a lot of these have the effect that we're wanting them to have. So, like I said, 6 things that we're really doing. The first one, high-level work by our professional learning communities. Those are meeting on a weekly basis. They get feedback bi-weekly, focused on the 4 questions of professional learning communities. It's something that's just part of our DNA at Tipton Middle School at this point. Like I said, we've been doing them for a couple years, and we're seeing really positive things there. Obviously, as part of that PLC work, second thing is making sure that there's a guaranteed Bible curricula that is connected to state standards. That's obviously something that was a project for those of you guys who were on the board when I came here, a project for kind of all of us across the corporation, and making sure that we're, honoring that of what we've said that we want to make sure that our kids get is important to do. As part of that, of course, and I'm kind of going through the questions of a PLC when I say this, but there's what we want students to know and then how we know that they know it. That's formative assessments. That's thing number 3. That is kind of a big strategy of making sure that we are seeing how students are doing as they're mastering these standards over the course of their middle school career. And then, of course, responding. That's formative to that in order to make sure that we are bridging those gaps, ensuring that kids get that information. So along with that, strategies 4, 5, and 6. 4 is we do data tracking on a biweekly basis to make sure that we're identifying students who are at risk for academics, behavior, or attendance issues. Obviously, we know that those kids have unique struggles, and those are often the students who are not necessarily passing iLearn. So if we can help those families and help those kids be able to bridge that gap, then we know that's going to have an effect as well. And then, of course, for students who are needing kind of that extra little push, we've got our acceleration periods that have really come into full fruition in this school year that we're in right now. Those are done by our math and our English teachers to make sure that we are doing targeted interventions with particular skill gaps that have been identified in students. So finally, that 6th one, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say it, but it's true. Just good teaching. Teachers showing up every single day, being present for their students, doing good work. And all of that kind of inquiry cycle of what good teaching looks like is done through that PLC process. So before I move on from the slide, like I said, I do kind of want to say where we are here. I've been here now at TMS for 4 years, and, we see the same thing that we see at middle schools. But we're beginning to see, if this is the curve that we're wanting to go for over the course of the next 3 years with the strategic plan, we are really seeing data that says that we're right here. Because our iLearn passing rates, they still, are following a little bit of a similar trajectory, but that trajectory is beginning to plateau. And we're seeing that students are actually, in fact, last year, 5 of our 6 tests, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, math and English, had a smaller decline in students than they had for the years prior to. So that's telling us that, in fact, our PLCs, these strategies I'm talking about are having an effect. And then, of course, that's beyond what I know that Mr. Dworsky has shared with you guys, that if you just look at our iLearn passing scores last year, they're all up from where they were the year before. So I'm really hopeful that just continuing those strategies that, again, have been implemented but are coming to fruition and really maturing in how we're able to do them better is going to have a huge effect over the course of the next 3 years to be able to see that we're going to improve those academic outcomes. So obviously, like I said, that's kind of the biggest one. And luckily, since I'm here, if there are any questions, does anyone have any? I know that, again, that's a big one and there may be questions there, but okay, great. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, so next one then. So for us, by the end of 2026-27, TMS will have 80% of students attending school at least 94% of the time. This one's a no-brainer. I do feel like, especially with our goal being 26-27, given already the increase that happened last year, that if we just continue to see that same growth trajectory, that we could legitimately be seeing 80% by the end of the 26-27 school year. A lot of that is, about making middle school a place that kids want to come to. I already think that is something that, frankly, our middle school, compared to a lot of other middle schools, does a really good job of. Our kids in the hallways every single day seem like they're happy to be there, But then, obviously, beyond that, it's making sure that we're connecting with families when there are unique things that are going on, trying to make sure that we're providing that opportunity for them to be able to connect there. We're also going to be working on that positive side there, quarterly attendance awards, again, kind of just making sure that families and kids know, hey, we see the good work that you guys are doing. We know that it's hard. And then just communicate with families in that, caring way that you guys know I do. So there we go. We have 3 communication goals as well. The first one is that all TMS families will receive regular communication from both administration and their child's teacher. I feel like it feels a little bit weirder with me saying it about myself as opposed to Scott Jaworski saying it about the elementary school, but whatever, I'll just brag on myself for a moment. I think that we do this pretty well already here. From what I hear from parents, they feel like the newsletters and, of course, the increased social media posting that's happening this year, along with just the constant communication that's happening from teachers about what's going on in their classrooms, This is a goal that I feel like, again, it's not so much changing anything, but making sure that we just keep that pressure on, keep it up, keep doing the good work that we do. So the second one, providing opportunities for community representation on advisory committees. I'm not sure that there's a whole lot extra for me to add compared to what was obviously both on a corporation and an elementary level. This is something that we think is important, and similar things are going to be happening at the middle school environment. And then finally, that TMS will effectively and frequently highlight more students and staff for in-school and extracurricular accomplishments. Again, Students of the Month, social media posts, ensuring that Pride tickets are being used to go ahead and make sure that we're talking about that positive behavior that students are exhibiting. And of course, making sure that the call home isn't always, hey, here's the dumb thing that your kiddo did, but rather, hey, here's the amazing thing that your kiddo did, and I want to make sure that you knew about it. So kind of a continued focus for us. Finally, we have two professional learning experience goals. We already, prior to the Tipton Way being developed, already had at Tipton Middle School something called collective commitments that were developed by staff about kind of what collegiality looked like at Tipton Middle School. One thing that was actually really fun for our first I found it fun. I don't know if everyone else found it fun, but I found it fun, was that we kind of took the Tipton Way and the collective commitments and we sort of put them side by side, and it doesn't take a genius to realize that, oh my gosh, these are exactly the things that we've already committed ourselves to. And so that was a really cool way for us to be able to reinvigorate the, hey, remember what it means to be a great teacher? I know that you remember. I've seen you guys do it for years. Keep it up, keep up this good work. But along with that, of course, with it being a part of TMS evaluation practices, we are going to be implementing things like ensuring that we are talking about that. I'm actually giving out tomorrow at our faculty meeting some Tipton Way certificates for some of our new teachers who just have been incredibly student-centered in their first month. And I want to make sure that I kind of point out, hey, way to show that Tipton Way of being student-centered. And that's something that we're going to do throughout the year, as well as just continuing to affirm those collective commitments along with the Tipton Way that's actually up in our meeting room. The Tipton Way and the collective commitments and how they come together and how teachers live those out. So a really cool thing for us to be able to use to be able to, especially when they're doing PLC and teamwork, to be able to hold one another accountable for what it means to be our best selves for our kids. So, and then finally to finish out, that staff will consistently meet in PLCs and teams. We are incredibly blessed at Tipton Middle School with having a master schedule that allows teachers to meet during the school day. And so they meet on either Mondays or Wednesdays, as well as Fridays for PD in their PLC groups, or they meet with their grade level teams on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I mean, that is professional development. That's them developing their own craft, developing their craft together through the PLC inquiry cycle. And during that time, that is goal-oriented time. So we actually already meet 50 hours of PD just in-house. Which is phenomenal, and we use that time to great effect to be able to do, well, everything I just talked about for the last 5 minutes. So it's really, really great. Those are kind of how we're going to live it out. If I could brown nose for a brief second before I finish, it was phenomenal to go through the strategic planning process with the building leadership team, and of course to meet over the summer as well. It's really exciting when we're able to all of us be pointing in the same direction and row the boat. So I'm looking forward to these next 3 years of implementing it. So, thank you.
All the good stuff he said we're also doing. Because he's already said it. No, at Tipton High School, we do, again, have a lot of similarities, stuff like that, so I'll try to kind of get through those things pretty quickly. The big one, though, I want to spend a little time is our literacy goal. That is by 26-27, that we're looking at students showing growth in reading comprehension based on teacher collected data. This looks a little bit different than the other two buildings. It's not tied to SAT, which, it very well could have been. I think it's important to note that I met with all of my department heads, and we talked through at the very last day of school last year, and I just laid the question out. Like, we're done, we've gone through assessments and the things that we've done with our previous school improvement plan. What is it that Tipton High School students need more of? What things do you notice about our students that aren't preparing them for a lifetime of opportunity and success? And in that, the leaders in the building were saying, well, the kids aren't reading or don't have the stamina to read, or they're not showing that they understand at the level maybe that they did prior to, so they kind of fell on reading comprehension as something that they wanted to look at more in our classrooms. And I think it's easy to look at that and think, well, why are we not teaching reading comprehension anyway? But I feel like we kind of got into a pocket where we made it acceptable for kids not to have homework or worry about doing stuff outside of school, so they could come in unprepared with reading, so we were spoon feeding a lot of that information, which then takes out the hard work kids have to do when they read, have to understand, and then do something with that information. So I think that this 3-year goal is going to allow us to kind of hone back in on what it means to do some real critical thinking and to dive into some text. We've kind of started using the term disciplinary literacy as we've had our PLC meetings already this year to talk about how we're going to improve reading comprehension. And basically that just means we're going to try to teach kids how to be able to read and understand in whatever discipline they select. So when they're faced with a challenge, they have the tools and skills they need to get that. So obviously content is really important, but we're having a lot of conversations on how to build skills in our kids so that when they have to look at technical drawing, or they go to college and have to go into an advanced math class, or read a historical article, any of those kinds of things, they'll have the literacy to understand that stuff a little bit better. And to be honest, the first 4 weeks of our PLC meetings, they are now cross-curricular, so they're not all going to have part of that sort of thing. The conversations and the ideas that are going around have been really kind of refreshing to talk about kind of doing some things different and sharing some things that are working. So it's important to note that the first year of this goal is to kind of look at how we create a baseline for this so that we can then at the end of the 3-year goal show growth in reading comprehension and overall disciplinary literacy, which is a little bit harder to just quantify right now. So I think we'll come up with something really great, and that'll be good. They'll work with content areas tomorrow to see how that fits for the different classes and kind of things we got going on in the high school. So some things to do there. We've got our targeted reading discipline PD, weekly work that's already happening, and then with our assessment work that we did last year, that's going to be a big piece in how we evaluate whether they can read, understand, and do these things with the things that they are asking to understand. Any questions about that? Yeah. So goal number 2 looks just like the other building, except for looking at 80% and 94%, or it's in 94% of the time or more. We made huge strides in this last year, but I'm telling you, Mr. Lyday has not let up on that. We've already had, any number of conversations. We've already got some kids that are in those, danger zones in terms of attendance. We continue to make calls. We continue to try to reach out to those, to either DCS or probation or parents first and all that. But trying to kick it up a lot because when they get to high school, a lot of them are ready to shut it down. So the ones that have attendance issues anyway. So we're doing the same stuff that we did last year with little tweaks here and there to try to get certain kids in case by case things and bump that number up, year in and year out. Understanding that each year we get a new set of freshmen and we got to kind of retrain them and show them the expectation of what it's like to be a high school student. Communication goal. So we're looking for regular communication from both administration and teachers. So I'm sure you all have seen the weekly newsletters. I have to really ramp up social media posts. I'm trying to get Mr. Lyday on the post, posting as much as I do. He at least shares it with me so I can get it out. I'm also going to develop a schedule for departments to share what they're doing in their classrooms. It's oftentimes really difficult to get teachers to say, I'm doing a cool thing, here's a picture, will you share it? So I'm hoping that if I force them to share some stuff, we'll get some cool things. So what's going on in the building, because I think that, I guess if I were ever look at another school or whatever, I'm probably going to Facebook or Twitter or something and trying to get an idea of what that school's doing. And the more stuff we can post in classroom and athletic things can be good for us in the long run. We get a quarterly communication with families, so I usually go with the D or below, or if we're having disciplinary or attendance things that teachers need to reach out and make that stretch across so we can improve those lines of communication. Updating family contact information, that's always a struggle for some reason in the high school. I think as kids get older, they have different living situations or whatever, and things get moved around, and we can only have 2 weeks to be contacting us. So try then the big thing, I'm gonna highlight it tomorrow, faculty meeting, it's just two-way communication. We send, we send emails, we'll send powerful reminders, and we do all that kind of stuff, but I'm really gonna try to push our staff to reach out and hear a voice, get an email exchange, go on something with kids that are, that are really struggling. We are increasing, just like the amount of parents and community members that we can get on this committee. The big one for me is the parent advisory committee. We don't have like a PESO or anything like that. So my vision right now for the parent advisory committee is that you come in, we can share kind of what's going on in the high school, and I really want to get the perspective of parents in the community in the things that we're doing, and hopefully they can chip in and help us with some decision making. Big thing would be what we do with community engagement, those activities that we have outside of school hours, non-athletic, that we really struggle with people attending that. So the parent advisory committee, I'm hoping that we and then communication goal number 3 is that we will effectively and frequently highlight students. Again, this is going to happen through Pride. We've had a slow start to Pride this year with getting tickets and getting back into the swing of like recognizing kids with those tickets. But we'll get back onto that and have our weekly drawings. We've seen the increased social media presence with athletics, but then I've tried to have at least newsletters and postings more of the academic type stuff that goes on there as well. And then trying to share out traditions like Pet Jersey Day for years. So we're really trying to reinvigorate that. I'd love to see like a building full of Jersey Thursday, rocket and old school stuff. So that's how we'll handle that. And then with our professional learning goal number 1, again, we're focusing on the Tipton Way and sharing that with staff. We saw that on the first day, and we'll be sharing that with staff members and kind of highlight each of those 6 things. We'll also be getting Pride tickets. I've actually given, maybe not for me to say, I've given Pride tickets to staff members, just various things that we've asked them to do and things they're focusing on. They're really rocking it. So Pride tickets for staff, and then when we do walkthroughs related to some of that feedback, back to the way. And then the 50 hours, similar to the other buildings, we collaborate every week. We've got different PD days, and then anytime we can target PD offerings, especially in the realm of reading comprehension and disciplinary literacy, try to get more people into those PD offerings, especially through the Wabash Valley Education Consortium.
This is the result of a lot of hours, a lot of days, a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. And again, I can't thank our administrative team enough, our building leadership teams, Dr. Glaze and the board, obviously, for your guys' leadership and guidance on this. Again, something that I think we're all passionate about. It's something we are really invested in. It's something we're looking forward to guiding us over the next 3 years.
And I just want to say on behalf of the board how thankful we are for the time that you invested in that. We talked about it a little bit even last board meeting, but I'm just so thankful for your direction and just some of the practical ways that we can watch and get excited to see just the growth in our school. So the board is definitely very thankful for your time. Next on our board packet were the department reports that you had some time to review. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. And next will be our financial report from Brett.
For August, we ended the month in the education fund with $787,025.77. Operations fund $1,213,057.72. Debt service $781,292.89. And rainy day fund $2,076,992.26. Prior to August, our transfers from education to operations totaled 200,000, or roughly 3% of the education revenue. Coming out of summer months, we had a lot of projects. Just ask Dr. Glaze. So our expenses were up for the month of August, 491,736 in operations and just revenue of 94. So we went ahead and made a $50,000 transfer from education to operations. And our corporation AFR was submitted by August 29th. And then Adam and I are communicating and watching when the portal will open for the food service AFR. We can get that done.
Thank you so much, and your work on that. Okay, by way of old business, we don't have any. So tonight under new business, first of all, we need to approve to advertise the proposed 2025 budget. The 2025 budget, capital projects plan, and bus replacement plan were shared during the public work session prior to this meeting. Permission is requested to advertise the 2025 proposed budget for the education, debt service, and operations funds, along with the capital projects and bus replacement plans. A public hearing is scheduled for September 24th. The board would then consider approval of the complete budget at the October 8th school board meeting. Need a motion and a second to approve to advertise the budget.
I move to approve advertising the proposed 2025 budget.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Okay, all those, yeah, go ahead.
The hearing on the 24th, we don't, that's just a public hearing, right? That's not the vote.
No, it's just public hearing, just an opportunity for people to hear the great information once again.
Again,
Yeah. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next is the approval of the 2024 to 2027 Corporation Strategic Plan. For the last few months, our corporation Board of School Trustees and Administration identified areas of improvement for the school system. In the spring, the Board of Trustees selected student achievement, professional learning experiences, and communication as our corporation priorities. This summer, the corporation administrative team developed corporation and building specific goals, strategies, and outcomes that align to the three priorities, which you've just heard. It is recommended the board approve the 24 to 27 Tipton Community School Corporation Strategic Plan as written. Need a motion and a second.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That approval passes. Next on our agenda are other matters to come before the board. Does anyone have anything? Okay. Upcoming advisory committee on September 16th is the Personnel and Business Affairs Committee. Other scheduled events is tomorrow is a professional development day, so students will not be in attendance. September 24th is our public hearing for the budget, as we stated, and here in this room. October 8th will be our next board meeting. October 11th, our parent-teacher conferences, and a fall break on October 16th, 17th, and 18th. So at this time, I need a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
Can I say something really quick?
Yep.
If you have a chance to come by tomorrow, we have Matt Miller, who is an expert in AI, and he's going to talk about how our teachers can use AI appropriately in the classroom.
What time is
So,
that?
I'll
rotate
send
a
you
little
the
bit.
schedule. He has several different little keynote things. He had the one main keynote at 8 o'clock, all right? Yeah, 8 o'clock. Basically, it's gonna break down barriers around AI. And our 2-hour sessions per day, first one in the morning and right after. As a teacher in your everyday life, and then also what that like. We have a committee, I think I mentioned for like I said, working on guidelines for AI in classroom. Right now, it's pretty much universally blocked. And we'll send that. Where everything is. Feel free to come in anytime.
Thank you for that invitation. Okay, all those in favor that we adjourn the meeting signify by saying aye.
I.
Opposed? All right, have a good evening.
Thank you all. Always, there's always
Something to
story
sign,
of my
something
life,
to
always something. Make sure to get Brooke in here.
Oh, you're fine, you're fine.
Terrible. I didn't
That's all right. Senor said there's nobody